I'm Edie.
I'm Judy, and together we're the Rainbow Grannies. Hey! We are at an exhibit in Pittsburgh today at the Frick Museum called Pittsburgh and the Great Migration.
Boy, are you in for a treat.
See you inside.
We're getting ready to check out some of the cars that have to do with the Great Migration. If you're not informed on what the Great Migration is, I'm going to help tell you a little bit more about that later on. But you're also going to get an opportunity to look at some of these really cool cars. Hey, so we're over here at Frick, and we've had a really nice afternoon checking out the cars.
Right. So it's real interesting for me is reading through some of the cars in the Pittsburgh history. So why don't you talk a little bit about the Great Migration, what that was?
For any of you that aren't familiar with the Great Migration, what it is during the Jim Crow era, there was a time for everybody needed jobs, and you couldn't find a job or being treated fairly. We're talking about African Americans. So, with this, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it showed a lot of the mapping route here and where people lived. And the big thing was, in the South, you were not being treated right or able to find occupations to take care of your family and everything like that. So the big thing was to come north to be able to find jobs. And that way, a lot of people ended up in Detroit, Pittsburgh, Chicago, those bigger cities. And so we see that even with now, it has a big, I'd say, minority population because that's where everybody went in order to work, when you wanted to. So one of the things, too, we've learned and checked out while we're here is a lot of these beautiful cars that are here. People bought these big, beautiful cars so that they could, travel with their families. You couldn't just hop on a bus and take your 5 kids and or you couldn't stay in a motel. You didn't even get to stay in a motel easily. But one thing that was available here was the Green Book. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Green Book too, but the Green Book it has a list of places that African American people can eat, have a meal, hotel, safe place to stay, So they listed them in a book so we would know where to stay.
Kind of interesting. We're talking about us coming from the LGBTQ community. It's kind of like, how many of us are still looking up gay travel books?
Right.
To finding a safe place to stay. So it seems like all minorities and intersectionality, we all, had to find a way to travel. And the cars became popular in the early 1900s because manufacturing chains that made them affordable. This is stuff that I'm reading about here.
Right.
So some of the Pittsburgh interest for me is that there's a car that's a cab company. Well, the yellow cab wouldn't go into the black neighborhood, so the people in the community had to develop their own. And so there was this one entrepreneur, of course, who got all the jitney drivers together and created that cab company. So what made me upset was even learning more. In Pittsburgh, I knew the Great Migration and jobs were available. We know there's problems, but it was still looking in the 1920s. Cars and vehicles made it possible for African American community to bring their own ambulances so that they could take care of people's health care, like everything that people needed for everyday life. Cars made it.
But even we see that even like while we're walking through here and reading different things, even right up to 1953, there was so much racism that where, it took so much for everybody to find their space, So even with the jobs and the coming up here and everything, it was such places as like Isley's. I don't know if you're familiar with Isley's. Isley's would hire black people, but you weren't able to work at the counter. There was just so many places like that where, you could work, but you couldn't come in the front door. You weren't allowed to shop there. You could still, you can work there, but you weren't treated right. So
something else that fascinates me when I'm looking at the cars, I'm saying, Edie, look at this, look at the tire in this car. The tire's all worn out. These aren't replicas. These are the real deal. These are the real cars that we use, and people made them available now.
So the one that's behind us right there, that was owned by. This one was owned by the guy that owned the Negro baseball team. Was it the Braves or
this was the Crawfords.
Okay.
And they also opened up the Crawford Grill, and they also was the one who put together the whole cab company. I mean, he just made a lot possible. So now this is the new name of somebody that I need to look up and learn more about him. You
Yeah.
know, 'cause
And so they had the
not
numbers
something I
running
learned
too.
in Pittsburgh history in grade school. You know.
Right. Right. They definitely wasn't teaching it in our little small town in Ohio neither. We heard that there was Martin Luther King.
Hmm.
So this has been really nice. Judy's got a lot of pictures of a lot of different cars that we go through, so she'll make sure that you all get to see them. If there's any comments you have and you want to know anything that maybe we can help fill you in on, just ask.
Yeah.
But we're at the Frick right now, and then it's got this little section here, even with table and chairs and all these cool books, you know,
Hmm.
of stuff that, let's see, making our way home, you know, the Overground Railroad. We all know what that means, right?
Right. Now, Pittsburgh and the Great Migration, produced a book. Right. So
Right,
we're learning about black mobility and the automobile.
right. So
Transportation.
what we did learn with the automobile is that with so many people having trouble traveling and getting because of the racism and everything, when they part of the stigma that goes to black people owning big fancy cars is, for one, there's safety in a big fancy car. For
Hmm.
you get a big car, you can put your whole family in there, and the blankets, your picnic baskets, and everything else, because you weren't going to stop at no Burger King on the way. You
Right.
weren't going to stop at no motel and put your kids and stuff in a nice little room and everything. You were going to hopefully pull over on the side of the road somewhere safe and sleep. And so that way you had a nice big safe car to
Hmm.
sleep in. Along with they were talking about the engineering of like a Cadillac, a Lincoln, or a Buick. Those were all good running cars. So if you
Right.
got
They're
out on the road,
reliable.
chances are you're not going to break down with your family and everything. So part of the Great Migration had to do with preparing, and they also talked about um, that without being economically able to buy homes, um, the you couldn't spend money on, like, because how did they say
Well,
it?
it was also the discrimination. If you're African American, you couldn't get a loan from the bank to buy a house or a
Right.
mortgage, but you could put your money into buying a car. Pick
We
up
all
a
know it
girl.
looks really nice to live in that great big fancy house on the hill,
Yeah.
but when the bank won't let you borrow the money in order to buy that big fancy house on the hill, next best thing is to have that nice fancy car, to at least show that I work every day for my money. This is what I have, and
And then it
the
didn't even
value.
stop there, because another thing that I read about is now we've got, African American man driving a big fancy car, and if he's driving by himself, he'll put on a chauffeur's cap so
Right,
that it wouldn't be questioned that this was his car.
right, right.
Hmm.
You
So
know,
all that, so having to camouflage, having to be closeted about owning your own property.
yes.
Yeah. So this was a nice exhibit. I really like this exhibit. I'm really glad that Pittsburgh and the Frick Museum put this on. I'm really glad.
Yep. I there's a book sitting right here. It's actually popping up the camera, so I can't pull it down right now. But one of the things it talks about is sundown towns too. And if you've ever done like a Google search on a sundown town, you would be amazed how close. And if you're not familiar with what a sundown town is a town where when the sun goes down, black people are not to be left in that town. There's a bunch of them that are still on the books. It
That
doesn't
floored me
it
when I
doesn't
found that.
necessarily mean that it's enforced, but it's
Hmm.
still on the books.
Hmm.
What amazed me was I looked it up, and there was a little small town I lived in Ohio, and there's at least three towns that are less than 50 miles from that little small town that had sundown laws that meant that you could no longer, you could not be in there, you know.
We're going to close this out. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye bye.